It looks like we're live, so let's jump right into that. Hi, my name is Justin Baca. Welcome to the Baca Project. Now, I almost said the Mike Winger intro where we learn to think biblically about everything. It actually is a part of my desire is to think biblically about everything. And it's something that I feel like it's so important, not just for Christians, but for anyone, is to go back to a source of knowledge that is unbiased and that is been proven to be valid in its stances. And the Bible has been proven for thousands of years to be the most trustworthy source of knowledge and wisdom. And it's something that we have to use in our lives to make our lives better and to make our lives more fulfilled. Now, today we're going to be discussing Israel. Now, it's not going to be political, though it might, be a little bit political. It's not going to be, super end times, even though that might come up a little bit. But the goal in this is to prove without a shadow of a doubt that God chose Israel, and that God chose Israel even though they were evil. Now, this is the fact of life that we often will hear from believers and unbelievers, is to say, well, how can you as a Christian support a country that does this? And that's something that I often will address with people, is that, okay, well, they always did this. They were always doing something that's wrong. And that's something I want to jump into with you guys, is to show you that Israel, even though they have done things that weren't great, God still chose them, not because they were greater than any nation, not because they were bigger or stronger than any nation, but he chose them because, one, he made a covenant with Abraham, two, he loved them, and three, he knew that he could use this little nation that was doing things that weren't necessarily great, or he knew that they wouldn't do things that were great, but he would use them as a way of being able to show the rest of the world the power of him, the glory of him, and also the redeeming factors of him. He would use Israel throughout all of time to be able to bring his son, the Messiah, to bring salvation to the rest of the world. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is when you look into the Bible. Now, many people really don't have a great understanding of the Bible, and I would encourage any and every single one of you to at least buy yourself a Bible if you don't have one. Don't use the phone app, don't use the computer app, though I do use them, but really only for studying tools or here on the stream or on the videos to be able to show you guys verses, which I will be doing in a minute. But I want to go through the beginning of the Bible. Now, you have the Torah, and this is the law that was given, okay? Now, Genesis was an example of the beginning of the world. Exodus was really where Israel was separated and was brought into this law. Now, what's really interesting is that while Moses had taken them out and the Exodus took place from Egypt, he was up at the mountain of Sinai talking to God, and coming down with the sapphire tablets with the 10 Commandments on them. Now, by the time that God had made that covenant with Israel and Moses was bringing down the offer to them, basically the law that they were to follow, the rules and the statutes that they would follow, by that time, they had already broken the first one. And they were worshiping a false god, a calf that was made out of gold. All of the men and women have given their golden jewelry, and they made false idols to worship. And they were saying, this is the God that has brought us out of Egypt. Yet that was not the God that brought us out of Egypt or them. It was just a golden cow. That's all it really was. And, so you see that even in the very beginning, they turned their back on God. Now, you might be thinking, well, then why would he choose them? Well, that's a good question, first of all. But the thing I want to focus on is that anyone would have done the same thing. It wasn't just Israel that did that. It was any country would have done that. Any people would have done the same thing that Israel did. Now, as you go through the Bible, you go into Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Now, Exodus is the story of when they left Egypt and they were going into the desert. Leviticus was the setting up of the tabernacle and the law, establishing all the different types of law, Levitical law, the Nazarene law, the Aaronic priesthood. These are all the things that were being set up during the time of Leviticus. Now you have Numbers, which is really them journeying through the desert and God giving a little bit more in depth to the law. So again, the Aaronic priesthood, that's where you find the Aaronic blessing in the priesthood. That's also where you see the Nazaritic law for the Nazarites that wanted to take that vow before the Lord. And we'll go into that in just a little bit. And, the setting up. Now, Deuteronomy was really the fulfillment, the culmination of the entire law, being in chapter 5 and chapter 6. Chapter 5 and chapter 6. Chapter 5 is going over the 10 commandments once again, really honing into all the different commandments of the Lord. Chapter 6 being the fullness and basically the concentration of the 10 commandments, which would be the two most important. Jesus actually referred to them in the book of Mark. The scribe came to him and he said, what's the most important commandment? And Jesus actually says, he quotes the Shema, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. The Lord is God. The Lord God is one. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus also talks about this in other gospels as well. And he says, this is a fulfillment of the entire law. If you love, you will not break the law, essentially is what he's saying, which is true. If you love God, you won't blaspheme him. If you love him, you won't worship other idols. If you love your neighbor, you won't covet his wife. You won't steal from him. You won't murder him. All these different things, right? They all coincide together. You cannot break the other laws if you fulfill those two. And so love is the fulfillment of the law. And that becomes a very deep thing, and we can have another conversation about that another day. But basically, as you go through Deuteronomy, that's the culmination of the law, the fulfillment, and that is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Now, once you get past that, you start to see what takes place in Israel, right? This is when, in Joshua, they come into Israel, which is very interesting. Yeshua is the one who brings them into the promised land, not the law of Moses. Another conversation for another day, but very interesting point to think about. So you see that they come into the land now. Okay, now they are in the time of the judges. So Israel has been waxing worse and worse and worse over the years as they've been in the country of Israel, and the judges come. Now, when it first starts, the judges, they basically are coming in, they correct Israel. Israel corrects itself and repents before the Lord. It comes back and then they do it all over again. They fail. They start bringing in false teachers. They start focusing in on, the pagan worshiping the Baals or the Baalim, which you'd say in Hebrew. And, so they're doing all these things. And so they keep sending more and more judges. Now, the most impactful in most people's lives of the judges would be the judge named Samson. We all know that story. Now, I find it really interesting is that Samson was a very interesting judge because he had taken a Nazirite vow from birth. Now, the Nazirite vow was that you cannot shave any of your hair and you cannot touch any dead body or be in the presence of a dead body, or that you cannot touch any fruit of the vine. That's not just wine or strong drink. That's also grapes, grape seeds, anything to do with the vine. You cannot have anything to do with it. Yet he breaks the entire Nazirite law. In the Nazirite law, if you were to break it, you'd have to start it all over again. You have to shave your whole body, you become ritually cleansed, and then start the whole process over again. He doesn't do that either. And so he eats grapes, he drinks, he does all these things. He ends up being around the dead body of a lion. He amongst other things, he's killing people. He's doing all crazy stuff. And then on top of that, he goes and he cuts his hair, or has Delilah cut his hair. And so he basically breaks the entire Nazirite law. He becomes one of the most pivotal judges in the book because God still uses him, even though he disobeys him, not just as a judge, but also as a Nazirite. So being in that Nazirite vow, he completely breaks it, yet still God empowers him through that, through his hair, he believes. And actually, it wasn't through his hair, it was through God. But he broke the vow, yet even God still honored it. Even at the end, when all of his hair was shaved and he was dwindled down, he asked God, and it shows that God, even through him breaking it, gives him the strength. And through the rest of the judges, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse until it culminates at the very end, which is just awful. Now you get into the kings. Okay, so this is when King Saul comes in, and basically Israel says, we want a king. God says, I am your king. And they say, no, that's not good enough. We want a physical king. Everyone else has a king. We want a king too. And so basically the kings just become worse and worse. Again, Saul is terrible. David, great. It basically makes a foreshadowing of Christ. He is known as the son of David. David was known as a man after God's own heart. His life shows Christ in so many different ways. He also is the one man that writes the most prophecies of the coming Messiah over anyone else in the book of Psalms, which is incredible. Now, he does something really bad. He murders, he covets, he cheats, and he steals another man's wife, and a whole thing happens, okay? Now, we know that story. Now comes Solomon, his son. Now, everyone thought Solomon was going to be the Messiah because everyone knew that the Messiah would be the son of David, and Solomon was the son of David. Now, Solomon decided that he wanted to have multiple wives, wanted to do this whole thing. He ends up starting to become pagan, following pagan worship, doing all these different things. So, not good. And basically, as he's doing that, he's rebelling against the Lord. At the end of his life, he writes the book of Ecclesiastes, basically saying, hey, without God, everything is worthless. Everything burns. Everything is just awful. Only with God can things be good. If you reject or neglect God, then everything becomes really, really bad. And so if you want to learn more about that, you want to know what life is like without God, then read Ecclesiastes. It probably will speak to you. But I wanted to kind of go through it super fast so we can get to Solomon's son. Now, Solomon's son, his name is Rehoboam. And Rehoboam becomes the king of Judah. So you see that during Solomon's life that there's a splitting of the two kingdoms. There's the kingdom of Israel, which was one kingdom. Now it becomes the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. So back in David's day, it was the kingdom of Israel, and he reigned from Judah. Now it's become a split. And so Rehoboam, the king of Judah, which he basically had his father's throne, Solomon's throne, and Jeroboam was the king of Israel. Now, Jeroboam wants to restore all of Israel under the rule of him, but he can't because Rehoboam is the king of Judah. And so that the king of Israel is supposed to be sitting in the tribe of Judah, and that's where he's from. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this, so we're going to jump right into this right here. Let's make sure that's up. Perfect. That's up. And okay, perfect. So this is 1 Kings 12:27. Now it says, if this people, it says, so this is basically Jeroboam talking. He's saying, if this people go up and offer sacrifices in the house of Yahweh in Jerusalem, then the heart of this people will return to their Lord, even to Rehoboam, king of Judah. And they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah, meaning that Rehoboam will now become the king of all of Israel, not just the king of Judah. So the king took counsel from his men and made 2 golden calves. And he said to them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold, your gods, O Israel, that brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Interesting is that's what they made was a golden calf. And they said that this was the God that brought them out of Egypt. So kind of a repeat of history here. And then he set one in Bethel and one in Dan. Now this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. And he made houses on high places and made priests among all the people who were not the sons of Levi. So you're seeing a few different things here, okay? One is that he had made these golden calves, okay? So people are worshiping these golden calves, and they are totally disobeying God's first commandment, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. They are worshiping because he is afraid of losing his power that he believes he has within himself, yet he doesn't honor God in the sense that God is the one that bestowed him as king of Israel. And so it's interesting that he puts one in Bethel, which means the house of God. So he's forcing, in order to keep his people, he's forcing the Judaism structure, but changing its theology, right? Which is really interesting because Bethel does exactly that in their church. And they force their own theology into the structure of Christianity. And that's exactly what he did here. So a pretty good reflection. You want to learn more about Bill Johnson, learn more about Jeroboam, the most wicked king of Israel. Now, when you look at this, he also put one in Dan. Now, Dan is the very highest point of Israel. The only thing higher is the Golan Heights and then Lebanon. So Dan is a very high place of Israel. I've actually been to the site where they had the altar in Dan. Just for the sake of YouTube, I cannot tell you exactly what they were doing there, but it wasn't good. Let's just say a lot of children were lost up there. It was pretty horrible. Now, when this was going on, they were totally disobeying God, and he was, instead of him going to Jerusalem to sacrifice and worship Yahweh, they were going to these places, in these high places, to worship other gods. So that way he could maintain his power. So he was thinking that these other gods would maintain his power, not Yahweh. And so there becomes the true evil of the situation, is that he entrusts Israel in the hands of false gods. Okay. Now, what's really interesting is that it said that he made priests from among all the people who were not of the sons of Levi. Now, the Levitical priesthood was actually a huge blessing from God, because God had made a vow that all firstborn belonged to him, that you are to give all the firstborn of Israel to God. But instead, he said, okay, I'm going to take the tribe of Levi and I'm going to make them a holy priesthood unto me, instead of you having to give me all of your firstborn sons, not in death, but in life, that their lives would be owed to Yahweh. But instead, he has the tribe of Levi become that priesthood that maintains all the sacrifices, maintains the tabernacle, maintains all these different things. Okay. So, he made priests outside of that covenant that God made. So again, breaking his laws in so many different ways. Now, the reason I bring up Jeroboam and Rehoboam was because Jeroboam was the staple or the standard in which God judged every king moving forward. Either they walked in the ways of Jeroboam or they did not walk in the ways of Jeroboam. So he was the pinnacle of evil for a king. If you were to walk in his ways, you were considered an evil king. That was God's way of saying, this king is wicked, he was bad. And the unfortunate thing is, most of the kings from here on in walked in the ways of Jeroboam, coming to that culmination of King Ahab, who married Jezebel, who basically brought in even more pagan worship, and he basically had no backbone and let her run the kingdom. Instead of trusting in God, he trusted in his wife, who was not a very good woman. Hence why when you hear the name Jezebel, not really a good taste in your mouth. And if anyone names their daughter Jezebel, it's just kind of sad. Probably shouldn't do that. Now that's kind of, she's kind of the Judas of the Old Testament, so to speak. And so you see here that now you've come to this place of Israel has just disobedient. The kings are disobedient. Everything is just totally wicked. And then you get to the prophets. And we're not going to go through all of that, but I do want to jump into what Jesus said about the prophets. And that's going to be in Matthew 21, verse 33. So I'll jump right into that. So 21, verse 33. Jesus says, listen to another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard and put a wall around it and dug a wine press in it and built a tower and rented it out to the vine growers and went on a journey. Now, when the harvest time approached, he sent his slaves to the vine growers to receive his fruit. And the vine growers took his slaves and beat one and killed one and stoned a third. And again, he sent another group of slaves, larger than the first group, and they did the same thing to them. But afterward, he sent his son to them, saying, they will respect my son. I love the way I think it's the New King James, surely they won't kill my son. That was another way it was phrased. But when the vine growers saw the son, they said amongst themselves, this is the heir, come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance. And they took him and threw him out in the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to the vine growers? And the Pharisees and scribes, they said to him, he will bring those wretches to a wretched end and will rent out the vineyard to other vine growers who will pay him the proceeds at the proper seasons. So you see here that Jesus is using this parallel between the prophets and the scribes and Pharisees. So he's saying that the prophets were sent to basically bring the fruit out of the people, meaning that he would bring the heart fruit, that they would turn away from their wicked ways and turn back to Yahweh instead of continuing down this path. Yet they just killed them, they stoned them, they beat them. You want to learn more about it, learn about Isaiah, learn about Ezekiel, learn about Elijah. All of these different people went through that. And so then he said, I'm going to send my son. Surely they won't kill him. Surely they'll respect him. What do? Well, they nail him to a cross, right? And so he wants them to basically answer what should be done to them, without them realizing that's what they've done. The same thing happened actually in David when he took Bathsheba, and the prophet came to him and said, "Hey, gave him a little analogy. Hey, there was a man, he had one lamb, and this other man had many lambs, and yet the man that had many lambs went and took that lamb. And what should be done?" And he goes, "That guy's wicked." And he goes, "David, that's you." And David just broke. So that showed that there was this difference between the two of them. David broke. David said, "Oh my gosh, I'm wicked. I'm wrong. I should not have done this." And you start to go and you see Psalms 51, which is a great analogy, a great expression of that brokenness. Whereas the Pharisees become hard-hearted and they start plotting in ways to kill him because they realize that he's talking about them, which is very interesting. But you see the difference between the two of them and the heart condition that they had. So even with that, he's basically saying that I gave you the authority, and you think the authority is within yourself, and you are going to control the narrative. You're going to control how the people come to me, meaning God. You come to God, and they come to God, and you want to control that. And so basically, he wanted to try to give them the opportunity of having their hearts changed and their hearts broken, though he knew they wouldn't. And so, but yet you see that Jesus came and he says, I came for the lost tribe of Israel. He lived his whole life in Israel. He spent all of his time in Israel preaching the word that was given to Israel and fulfilling the law that was given to Israel, and died in Israel. And so he basically is showing them that he loves Israel, and there are some bad fruit in Israel. Those bad fruit don't have a second pathway. There isn't a pathway to God through what is known as modern day or even ancient Pharisaical Judaism. Judaism is not one of two ways. There's only one way, one truth, one life. That's Jesus Christ, Yeshua the Messiah. That's the only way you can get to the Father, is through him. Now, is that Christianity? Is that a messianic Judaism? That's another conversation for another day. I mean, I believe that they're both the one and the same, just two different languages. And we can get into that later. But basically, God was not ever done with Israel. Loved Israel so much, he sent slaves, servants of himself over and over and over and over again, and then sent his own son to bring salvation to those people. That's how much he loved them. And that's in John 3:16, for God so loved the world. That wasn't God so loved the world for everywhere except Israel. It was that God so loved the world, the whole world. But he uses Israel as an example. He uses Israel as this little tiny nation to explain and expose everything that's wrong with humanity. And so you see that this is exactly what he's done for all of time. Now, you may think, well, Israel is evil. Israel's done this. Israel's done that. Well, you're probably right. You're probably right. I don't know. I don't know all the ins and outs of it all. But I do know that Israel is evil because humankind live there. That's just the nature of humankind. And the interesting thing is every single person in the world is looking at Israel. They're not looking at every other country. We're not sitting there hearing about Somalia every single day in the news. We're not sitting here listening about Mexico or hearing about China every single day in the news, but we are hearing about Israel, which means that they have a giant spotlight on them. Now, one thing is if you, as one person, a little microcosm, and you had a giant spotlight on you where everyone in the world was watching you and everything that you did, everything you said, I can't go to thought, but everything you did and said, people would probably think you're pretty evil. So imagine this country, this little tiny nation, everyone's watching everything they do. Every person that associates in some way, shape, or form with the country, everything they do is under spotlight. Now, the interesting thing about light is that it exposes darkness. It exposes anything that's wrong that happens from a specific place. And so if that's the case, and Israel is being exposed in every single way, for one, that's sanctification. That's a good thing. We want them to be sanctified. But two, you're going to see more evil things coming out of Israel because the light's on them. It's like, yeah, there's cockroaches in Israel. Okay, great. There's cockroaches everywhere. That's the nature of thing. But if you put light on something, well, all the cockroaches are going to start spreading. And you're going to go, oh my gosh, there's cockroaches everywhere. Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's darkness. There's bad things that come out of the country of Israel. No one's denying that. No Christian is denying. And if they are, they're foolish. There are wicked things that happen in Israel. There are very wicked things that happen in the United States of America. We don't have the spotlight that Israel has on us right now. We just don't. If we did, people would probably think America's pretty evil. And a lot of people do. So that's just the nature of things. But does that change that God chose them? No. God said, this is my everlasting covenant, irrevocable covenant. It means that it cannot be broken. It cannot be changed. I always point back to the book of Hosea. Hosea was a man that married a lady of the night. Let's just say that. Okay. So she was a woman that sold her love for money. And he married her, and she went and continued to play the harlot as the devil. I mean, as the Bible says it. The Bible says she played the harlot. Now she went and played the harlot, and he said, hey, no. And she said, I'm so sorry. Can I come back to you? And he says, okay. She does it again. And he says, okay. She does it again. He says, okay. Finally, she does it. And the man that she sold herself to decides to go and sell her at the city square, the middle of the city, and sell her for the highest dollar. And Hosea goes to God and he says, God, why would you have me marry this woman? She just plays the harlot. That's all she ever does. And God responds and says, don't you see that this is how I love you? This is how I love Israel, that you consistently play the harlot. You consistently turn your back on me. Yet I love you. And so what does Hosea do? He sells everything he owns. He gives all of his inheritance and goes to the city square and buys his bride. And that is such a perfect example of what God does. He gives everything he owns, his son, the son whom he's well pleased with. He brings him down to Israel. He loves them. He heals their sick, they're blind, they're lame. He comes here. He gets examined by the people, which we're going to talk about next week. He gets examined by the people. He gets judged, persecuted, all these different things. He goes to the city square, the Antonia fortress. He gets judged by the Gentiles, and then he gets strung up and being crucified. And that's the fulfillment of him giving his inheritance so that he can purchase his bride, which is Israel and the Gentile church. Now, again, I have to say, just because you're Jewish, just if you're secular or you're in what's known as, the Orthodox Judaism or Chabad, whatever it is, that's not a second route. There's only one way, and that's through the acknowledgement of Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus the Christ. That's the only way. But he is the Jewish Messiah. And God has put his everlasting covenant over this physical country of Israel. So when someone comes and says, how can you support Israel as a Christian? For one, the God you worship, he supports Israel. Doesn't support their wickedness, but he supports their existence. And two, Romans chapter 15 makes it super clear. I think that you should look into that, read it on your own. But essentially, and you again, read it on your own, read the whole chapter, read the whole book of Romans if you can, but read the whole chapter of chapter 15. He basically says, as Christians, Gentiles specifically, we are indebted to Jerusalem for spiritual blessings. How much more do we owe them material blessings? And so, yes, we are to support Israel. Psalms 22 says to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. You should. But if you have the ability to support Israel financially, materially, you should. Now, that's not meaning go and write a check to the country of Israel. That's silly. Or, hey, there's an abortion clinic in Tel Aviv. Let's send them a check. Again, silly. You should support the messianic movement within Israel. Maybe you find out there's a messianic congregation. Or maybe you know of a messianic organization inside the country of Israel. Now, I work with a messianic organization, a Christian Jewish organization that supports different organizations in Israel. It's called Gihon Springs. You can find it in the description, find it on my channel. But I'm not saying I'm the only option. There's a lot of different options out there. But that's where you have to realize that it is a responsibility of Christians to support Israel. It's not just this hysterical craziness like, oh, we love Israel because we're Christians. Well, yeah, but why? Why do you love Israel? And that's where the sloganizing of Christianity has become so, in my opinion, cancerous. You look at all these people, and all these people are just saying these things that maybe are true in their face, but they don't really understand the depth of them. You got to get to know the depth of the things that you say or the things that you believe when it comes to Israel. So with all of that said, I do appreciate you guys tuning in and watching this. I know I was saying prove me wrong. Do me a favor, prove me wrong in the comments. Leave a comment, say something that you disagree with. If you do. If you agree, great. You can still leave a comment or just like the video. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And you know what? More than anything, put in the comments, did you like live stream? Did you like me actually doing a live stream? I know that it's early in the morning here on the West Coast, so it's harder for everyone to get in on it. But if you do, let me know, because I'll start doing that instead of the pre-recorded videos, or at least the pre-recorded videos. And so again, thank you so much. If you want to support me, you can do that on Buy Me a Coffee. I could definitely use it. I love coffee. So thank you so much. Have a blessed day. May God bless you, keep you, and